Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires. It's a host of damned souls of telepaths.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. He can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And again tonight I'm here with Mark Johnson.
Who's that guy?
Hello, Mark. I don't know.
He sounds kind of shady to me.
I remembered the name this time. I remembered your name.
Well, you know, that is something. After how many years we've been working together?
Oh, God, centuries. We've been together for centuries, Mark. You know that.
Well,
but the point is, I can't help it, and I've got an excuse for not remembering your name.
And why is that?
It's an age thing. It's an age thing. Look how old I must be, the grandmother of radio. The only way I remember it, when I actually come on here and introduce you, is the only way I remember it is if I look at the screen and I see it written there in front of me. I know that's insulting, but
no, not really.
I want to call Mark or Farkle.
Yeah. It's not really that insulting because sometimes I can't remember my own name. That's what happens when you get to our age. You suffer from CRS.
Yeah. But honestly, all I want to do is call you Mark or Farkle. You know, if you put Mark or Farkle up there, it'd be a lot easier for me because I'll remember that one.
Yeah, well, my aunts would appreciate that. That's what they used to call me.
Yeah. Well, that's it, Mark or Farkle.
I made the mistake of telling you that one day.
Markle. I think it's cute. Absolutely cute.
No, I'll never live it down.
Anyway, come on then. What have you been up to?
Not much. Dealing with the crazy weather here. One day it's warm and sunny. Next day it's cold and rainy. And welcome to spring. And today I had my second COVID shot, and I will admit it's kicking my butt a bit. But I'm going to do my best to plod on through the show tonight.
Yeah. Well, it's the same here. You know, April was lovely. Absolutely lovely. Glorious weather all through April. But as soon as we hit May, that was it. The weather just went kaput. We've had rain, we've had sleet, we've had hail, we've had high winds, we've had snow on the hilltops, and we've had sunshine. But it's been cold all the way through. It's totally gone bonkers, the weather.
Oh, we actually had hail this weekend too.
Bonkers.
I haven't seen hail in New Jersey in years.
Oh, well, there you go. You see, you got it from us.
That's it. You sent it our way.
Apparently, yeah. Apparently, the Gulf Stream is flowing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, we need to send you our crappy weather.
Moment.
I said we need to send you our crappy weather.
No, we've already got it, Mark. We've already got it.
Yeah, well, you're the UK. You always have crappy weather.
Don't give us anything crappier than what's out there at the moment, I tell you.
I know that whenever I finally get around to visiting the UK, I know never to bring. I was saying, I know whenever I get around to finally visiting the UK, I know I don't have to ever worry about bringing sunscreen.
No, just an umbrella, darling, and galoshes, as you call them, Wellington boots, we call them here. just make sure you got your rubber boots, and you'll be all right. And an umbrella. Now, Gertie, I tried to get her out for. Will not go out. It's raining. There is no way. So there I am in my pajamas with an umbrella out there on the patio with the dog trying to, see if she'll do a wee. But as soon as I open the back door to let her out, normally to go down the garden, as soon as she sees the rain, she turns and comes straight back into the kitchen. She will not go out and get her feet wet. No. Not at all.
My dog doesn't like her getting her feet wet either.
The only way she gets out there if it's raining is if she's got to boot up the bottom. Why don't we get into the show tonight then, Mark? Who's their guest?
Well, I'm really excited to talk to our two guests for tonight. We have two for the price of one. Tonight we're talking with David Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd, who they're authors who've written a few books, and their latest book is The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. So Dave and Carla, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, it's great to meet Irene and Mark.
You too.
Hi, Irene.
Hello. Hi, yes.
Now,
sorry about all the problems I'm having. If I'm cutting out people, I'll try to be quiet for a little while until this settles down, okay?
Okay.
Right. Because I'm having sound loss here on this end.
Okay. Can you hear us okay?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you, but I am having a few problems with sound, so if I go quiet, you know why.
Okay. Well,
and that's all the people and listeners out there.
Okay. Well, let's give it a try. We'll get the show on the road here. So Dave and Carla, thanks for coming on, and just wondered if we could get started, if you can both tell us a little bit about yourselves and then what got you together to write these books. And of course, we're going to be talking about the newest one about past lives and reincarnation. So tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Dave?
Well, yeah, sure. I'm actually a physician. I was a nurse for 10 years. Went back to medical school, practiced for 25 years, recently retired. I'm now serving as the Vice President of Medical Affairs in a small community in the Midwest. And our experience, well, I should say, Carla has been my office manager and my best friend for over 25 years. And she recently retired, too.
Yay.
Yeah, that's what we think. We're tired and retired every day now, so that's good. But back 6-7 years ago, we started electronic medical records in our office. And it was what I would call a really horrible experience. After practicing for years using charts and paper and pen, it was becoming really stressful. And Carla usually says I'm a really friendly, nice guy, but I was becoming extremely grouchy, miserable, had some personal issues in life also going on. And one day she walked up and said, if you don't change your attitude, we're going to have a problem here. You got to start to be a little bit nicer, a little friendlier, and you're really being unreachable. And so I'll let Carla tell you some of that.
Well, it was in 2014. Like you said, we were not young when the government decided that everyone was implementing electronic medical records. So it was pretty stressful. And, Dave had, like you said, some personal issues at home that we were not aware of. But we decided one day, after reading an article in AARP magazine, that we would meditate. I gave him two choices. Either I'd call a counselor or we could meditate. And Dave said, well, let's try meditation. So we thought as an office, we would meditate together. So the first day, It's a small office, and the other two girls that work there came in early, and we all started a half an hour before the patients began. And it was really difficult for those of you that meditate. It's hard to turn your mind off, and I had meditated years before, but being raised Catholic, of course, I was always told that I would conjure up something that, I shouldn't. So that scared me off. And then I decided I'm going to try and meditate again. So we did. And the first day we all complained how it was really difficult to turn our minds off. And we're so bombarded with electronic media, phones, TV, all of the above. And then the second day, we all talked about all the colors we saw. We all saw different bursts of colors. Then the third day, the other two girls said, we don't want to come in early. We'll do it at home. And but Dave and I, we had to get there early anyway. We decided we'd go ahead and just meditate. So we did. And pretty soon the patients started to come in, and we got up and we started to get busy, and Dave followed me into the office, and he said, Carla, I know you'll think this is very strange, but I think I was just talking to your mother. Well, that got my attention because my mother had died nearly 20 years before that, and he never met her. And so I stopped. Now, I'm very open-minded, always have been. So I wasn't surprised. I had been to psychics and mediums over the years, and Dave had not. So he said, we had a conversation about it, and one of the other girls in the office was my sister. And she went back and she dug out a picture of my mother, and she brought it up and she showed it to Dave. And Dave said, yes, that's who I was talking to. And Dave said she was very jovial and laughing, and she showed me a shoe. And I went over to the computer and I Googled dancing shoes. Now, my mother had been a ballroom dancer, and she wore a specific type of shoe her entire life. She'd wear it for dress up and to church. And I Googled, and maybe 60 pair of shoes showed up on the screen, and Dave went over and picked out the exact shoe. Now, that was, too coincidental. We all kind of had chills up our back, like, okay. And then between the picture and the shoe, it couldn't just be a good guess. So we decided that we would continue to meditate. Of course, that this was opening our minds up to all kinds of things. And all we wanted to do was just meditate and see what would happen. And of course, our first book, the one that you're talking about, that's actually our first book, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. The reason it's written with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth is because that day in 2014, Dave was never aware that he had a gift until that day, that he could easily reach the spiritual world. And of course, the first person from the spiritual world that contacted Dave was my mother. And the next day, Dave's spirit guide contacted him, and her name is Isabella. And shortly thereafter, my spirit guide, Elizabeth, contacted me. And there was also a day, because we sat and journaled everything, we started to get faces and objects and places, and we wrote everything down because none of it made any sense. But there came a day when I said to Dave, well, who's God? And Dave said, all of a sudden he heard, I am. And he knew at that moment. He was very overwhelmed. He started to cry. I said, what's going on? He was so emotional. He said at that point he knew. So that's why our book is subtitled with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth, because they wrote the book with us. And that just started us on our journey of finding out who we have been over the past 6,000 years, 29 lives together.
Oh, my God, 29?
29.
Wow.
Yeah, Mark, this is another interesting little story that happened early on while we were meditating. I was sitting there and I started to remember my life as a child. And I remember
in this life.
Yeah, in this life, yes. And I remembered suddenly being 3 years old, and my father and my mother were packing us up in the little blue sedan. We lived in Nebraska, which is way in the middle of the United States. And my dad was going to graduate school on the GI Bill after the Korean War. And we got in the car, and I remember traveling all the way across the country. And they kept talking about Boston. And so while I'm meditating, I'm having this memory of being a 3-year-old, going to Boston, and I'm running on the beach in Boston. And I see the Ferris wheels in the back and roller coasters and the little feet hanging, and I'm running on the beach and I'm screaming and yelling. And I'm going, I'm yelling. And suddenly I remember this little girl who jumps up. She screams, "Be quiet, you're bothering my family." She pushed me down. She sat on my chest. She actually kissed me on the forehead. She jumped back up. She put her hands on her hips, and she was looking at me with this scowl, and she had this little blue 2-piece ruffled bathing suit. And I'm telling Carla all about this memory because I think it's so vivid. And Carla looked at me and said, "Dave, it was me."
And that was in this life. And the reason I remember that is that I'm from Boston. First of all, my sister and I were absolutely floored. We both said at the same time, "When did you live in Boston?" We had known Dave since 1998, and never once had he mentioned living in Boston. But as he told the story, we knew exactly what beach he had gone to that day, because Revere Beach was not just sand, it was also an amusement park. And as he described it, we knew it well. And that particular day, the reason I remembered it and I didn't need to meditate was because I was raised, the youngest of 6 girls, good Catholic family. My parents were always splitting up and getting back together. And this particular day, we were not well off. We didn't own a car. My father rented 2 cabs, and all of us went to the beach. And for whatever reason, when we got there, I didn't have a bathing suit. My parents did not really have the money to go across and buy me a bathing suit, but we did. We all went across the street into a little souvenir shop, and I got my first brand new 2-piece bathing suit, blue with ruffles. So when Dave began to tell this story, it was like, oh, how could you know that? It was just, one of those moments. So when you take that memory and you mix it with what had already transpired with the picture of my mother in the shoe, you can imagine we were more and more anxious to find out whatever detail we could possibly find out from Dave.
So every day, Mark, we kept meditating because we're like, how strange.
Obsessed.
Yes, how strange that we had met as children and then didn't meet again for 38 years.
That's highly unusual. But you know what? It's a synchronicity where you were meant to be together.
Absolutely. Yes. And soon, while meditating, I had another memory. And this time, I come in and I'm telling Carla the memory, and I said, it was the strangest memory. I was standing in an alley, and I looked across, and there you were, standing in the alley. And then I saw 2 flashes, and then I felt something hit my chest, and I was thrown back on the ground and realized I'd been shot and that I was dying. The next day, I had another memory, and I remembered that same woman I saw in the alley. And I'll tell you, this woman reminded me of Carla so much. She had the same steel blue eyes, except she was dressed like a flapper with the little ruffled dress and everything. And it was fringed, yes. And it was very strange. And the next memory was when I met her. And I met her at a wedding of a man named Angelo. And I invited her to go to breakfast the next day. And she met me. And then I was in this memory, and I'm walking down the beach in Chicago. And we're going along Lake Michigan, and she's talking about her life as a child and how she had moved to Chicago to become a dressmaker, that her father's name was James Donaldson and her name was Ruby, and that she was come to Chicago, she was going to become a dressmaker. And I thought, this is so strange because it's so vivid. I'm walking with Carla, but she doesn't look like Carla exactly. And I came in and I told Carla. And Carla's very curious, and she ran out the next day she had off and she started doing research.
Actually, I got onto Ancestry.com, and you wouldn't believe it, but in 1904, apparently Ruby Donaldson was a rather popular name in Bullock, Georgia. But the fact that I knew my parents' names, James and Anna Donaldson, and I knew that I had been one of 11 children, I could actually find all of that information. I corroborated it on Ancestry.com. I found pictures of my parents. I couldn't find any of me. A couple of my siblings were in there. But then I also found an article on a gangster named Angelo Genna. And he was the big mob boss before Al Capone in Little Italy in Chicago. I never heard of him before, but apparently he married Lucille Spinola on January the 10th, 1925 at Ashland Auditorium. It was actually like a makeshift church for them because there were over 3,000 gangsters and there were no churches that could handle that many guests. And then I found a second article that was a cake, their wedding cake. Two women were standing next to it. It was over 10 feet tall. So I called Dave and I said, Dave, I can corroborate a lot of what you're telling me. We're not just crazy, you're not just imagining these things, but I'm actually finding ways to prove that, you are connecting with somebody and they are telling you things that are accurate. So we still continue to meditate and journal everything. And over a period of time, we found that Dave has had 42 lives so far, and I have had 34. And again, 29 of them have been together. We know all of our names, our astrological signs. We know how many kids we had, where we lived, what we did, what we died from. We have a great big chart, a board downstairs. And our first book, we actually have 20 of our past lives in that book, The Gift of Past Lives. And then after each story of that life, we have a little lesson. Because Isabella says that past lives are fun and they're fascinating, but we're meant to learn lessons from them. And, we create karma with each life. So at the end of each one of those stories, we actually discuss what we did wrong in those lives. And we don't like to use right and wrong. We like to use positive and negative, what we could have done better. So, they're all outlined. And so we're learning from that. And as these lives started to accumulate and Isabella would give us the details, she started to tell us something called the 5 simple rules. And she said, it's kind of like the 10 Commandments broken down so that we can actually remember them better. But she said, we're here to learn love and compassion. And if we can live a life that is without conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness, and if we can do everything in love, then we can get off of this reincarnation cycle. Because when you take, all of your positive and your negatives, if you add them all up, they all fall under either love or they fall under conceit, jealousy, selfishness, or unforgiveness. So it's not easy, apparently, because we've been doing this over 6,000 years.
I think we're slow learners.
Well, you have more than me, so apparently. Or I sit in my life review longer.
It's us guys.
Yeah, we have some slow issues every time.
Apparently.
Well, yeah, I find the whole thing very fascinating. I've always been fascinated with the idea of past lives and reincarnation. It's something that, I grew up in the church, and when I started getting in my late teens, early 20s, my whole paradigm started to change. I started shifting more over towards spirituality and looking into different concepts, with which reincarnation was one of those concepts. And I've talked to a lot of people about past lives. We've done this radio show for a long time, and we've interviewed a lot of people about past lives and the different aspects of it. And I'm curious to hear your take on it compared to what we've heard from other people, because you remember, what is it, 37 and
34 and 42.
34 and 42 past lives. And I've heard some people talk about that we could be having thousands of past lives. So I guess it all depends.
There's some depends on your perspective on some of this. And I'll tell you, Mark, we've marked all of these out. Isabella says that she's been my spirit guide for 6,000 years when my first incarnation, and that was Carla's first also. And we were born on the Mount of Olives approximately 6,000 years ago. We went and did the research because as a physician, I've been skeptical of everything, but this experience becomes so overwhelming that I can no longer be skeptical. But we went back and looked, and there was actually a civilization there between 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. That's not a settlement now, but when they did archaeological digs, they found those people that lived there. It's just like this has become so big for us that we finally had a day where we jumped in the car and we drove to Chicago and went to Little Italy, and I walked down Halsted Street, turned the corner where I thought I should turn. Isabella says, "You're getting warmer." And I looked over and I said, "This is Ruby's apartment from 1925, right here." And a friend of ours did the research and found out that the building was built in 1899 and had been an apartment building ever since. So things kept stacking up so high that I couldn't any longer say, this isn't happening. And the memories kept coming, detailed. And then we start to realize that not only do I see Carla in these lives, and we start to see other people that we shared this life with. And so we start to see that we actually do have some soul groups that we return with, and we call them family mates or karmic mates, because they're either here to help you or to test you, and or you have some karma to fix with them. And so that starts to interest us, and then we start to look into more things. And for me, we started looking at, because I was raised Catholic, I started reading everything I could find and asking Isabella every question. And Carla, God bless Carla, she has the most curious mind of anyone I've ever met. She's absolutely the most wonderful person alive. And she will ask questions. And Isabella knows that the answer is coming in minutes, because the answer starts flowing. And we start to find things like, Isabella says, reincarnation was God's plan from the beginning. There is no hell. Hell is what we create here, the karma we create that we have to live through.
Yep.
That we're here to learn these lessons.
Yep.
And the lessons are that we have to learn compassion. We start to experience time between lives during our meditation, and we start to see past life reviews. Part in our book is writing about some past life review, or what we call the time of atonement, that is that time between lives. And there just is so much that's there that I started, reading biblical stuff, trying to find it, and you start to look at, and I'm not going to get too preachy, but if you start to read the Old Testament, what you see is God made a covenant with man and they screwed up with Adam. God made a covenant with Abraham and they screwed up, and God gave him another chance, and then they gave a chance to Noah, and then they give a chance to King David, and then we have Jesus's covenant. It's really a story of generation after generation returning again. You start to see things like I have done some Hebrew research trying to find things out, and you find out Leviticus was actually written originally in Aramaic. The book of Leviticus is the book about atonement, and the book of Leviticus never uses the word sin. It uses the word kata. And kata was an Aramaic word that meant you failed to reach your goal, and if you needed to, you should try harder. I start seeing those things and start seeing a picture that's way different than you sin and you go to hell. You see God giving the Hebrew people chance after chance. You see a chance for atonement. Then you start reading the history and you realize in the Old Testament they used the term Sheol, which was the Hebrew word for place you go when you die. Or they used Greek early, which was Hades, which is the place you go where you die. It doesn't have anything to do with heaven or hell. It's just where dead people go. And then you'll find the other place that they write of is the Valley of Gehenna. Well, the Valley of Gehenna is actually a physical place. It's the ditch outside of Jerusalem. And it's where the old judges and the old kings in Jerusalem used to put their illegitimate children to death, and they would burn them. The New Testament, when it becomes the King James Version, changes the Valley of Gehenna, Sheol, and Hades to the word hell. And hell, I know King James, this is strange, but King James's wife was of Germanic origin. And you find out that the German god of the underworld is called Helya.
Germanic.
And the Germanic god of the underworld in the pagan world was called Helya. So they wrote a pagan into the New Testament and changed it to hell.
Well, and this could be, we've actually done whole shows on this, and it could be another show talking about the Bible itself being changed, rewritten, reinterpreted over the years, because there's a lot of evidence that reincarnation was very much a part of both Old and New Testament. Before
yes.
the councils of Nicaea and Constantinople back in the 300 AD, around that area.
325, yep.
And where they
we've done a lot of that research too, Mark,
yep.
because you just have to look into it.
Well, you know what? Parts of it are still in there. The whole concept of Jesus tells his disciples, you have to be born again. And, we have born again Christians here, not really understanding the whole idea. He was talking about reincarnation. You have to literally be born again. There was even one time in one passage, I forget which book it was in, when Jesus was asking his disciples, who do people say I am? And they say, oh, well, you're Elijah, or you're Moses, or one of the other old great prophets. In other words, they were talking about past lives. And that still made it through.
Correct.
So yeah, it's definitely still it's still in there, even though a lot of it has been removed because they didn't want people to think they had multiple chances to get it right, and they wanted
because you can't control the people if they think they get another chance.
Exactly.
And it's even interesting in the church when you look at it. They used to say judgment happened at this end time. However, the church also said you could pay indulgences, and if your family really wasn't good enough and they were in some sort of purgatory, if you paid indulgences, the Pope could say it was okay and he could judge, and then suddenly it was okay because they could make it to heaven. Those are interesting terms.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
Yeah, and if you go back to the last really defining moment is in about 200 AD. Origin of Alexandria is really the first real church father. He writes almost all of the doctrine of the early Catholic Church. His writing includes transmigration of the soul, pre-existence of the soul, and chance after chance. And in 400 AD, 200 years after he died, they excommunicated him from the church. But he wrote most of the church doctrine.
I guess they didn't like what he had to say.
Yes, if you voted in the Council of Nicaea that Jesus is God, and he says, we get chance after chance, so Jesus' death doesn't really have a meaning. You have to get rid of him.
Yep. Yeah, that's what when I was changing my whole paradigm and belief system, and started moving away from. It took me a while, and actually, I'll admit, I was bitter there for a while because I tried being a very good Christian and thinking, oh my God, if I didn't do this, I'd go to hell and whatnot. And after a while, when I realized I didn't believe in that anymore and I didn't feel that was true, it took me a while to kind of get past it because I harbored some bad feelings about it. And now I had an identical twin brother who stayed in, he was Lutheran. His wife was Lutheran, so he joined a Lutheran church, and Lutheran and Catholic churches are actually very, very similar. Mm-hmm. But he stayed religious, and he had a conversation with me one day because he knew my whole family knew I was off in a different direction, and he told me one day, oh, well, I feel so bad that when we die, we're never going to see each other again because you'll be in hell. And he didn't appreciate it when I laughed at him. Because I just didn't take that seriously because, I realize you're right, hell is where we are now, and hell is what you make it. This lifetime is what you make it. And we are here to learn a lot of different experiences, not only just to learn how to love and get past all of the other issues, but also to just to have experiences. I was told recently, and I'll get into this a little bit later, from let's just say it was from somewhere else. So, somebody I was talking to, something kind of came through, which would happen a lot with this friend. And I was being told, basically, because I was asking questions about all the turmoil we're currently going through. And, how do we, get past this or whatever? And I was still told, basically, you don't. You experience it, and that's it. You move on. You don't get past it. You don't have to do anything about it. It's just there. It's part of the learning experience that we're here, and you move on to the next. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Now, I wanted to go back to, you talked about when you started learning meditation, and it was during meditation that once you made that connection, that's when you started learning about all of these past lives?
Yes.
Yes. We did finally go and get past life regression training with Dr. Brian Weiss because we wanted to learn more.
But that was only a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Actually, the first book we wrote everything before we had any training.
The first and second.
Yeah. The second one, the second book is Hell No, Reincarnation. So you can see where all of that religious stuff sort of popped up because we were doing as much research as we could. We also found the research done by Ian Stevenson, Jim Matlock, Jim Tucker, where they have about 2,500 kids that with spontaneous past life memories that they've been able to verify. And then we started looking at things like near-death experiences, our past life experiences, and we started to see that a lot of them have very similar experiences, at least the time between lives or the time when people go back from a near-death experience. They frequently see passed over loved ones. They see beings of light. They plan to come back of some kind, or they're told they have to come back. And the other part is it's not 100%, but a significant majority of people say after an NDE that they didn't want to come back. We don't necessarily want to choose to come back into this life that is filled with stress when everything there is without need or wants. However, we need the experience, and it's even possible we need the experience because your soul has to grow, has to learn. It may be that your soul has to have shared experiences so that in a non-spiritual world you can share with others the experience. And in that non-physical world, we don't have quite the same senses. We are telepathic, but we're not seeing and hearing and feeling. But we've had those physical experiences, so now we can communicate because we have shared experience.
Now, I've tried meditating off and on over the years, and I actually stopped for a long time. I got kind of caught up. I was very learning a lot of spiritual practices, and then I got caught up in the physical world for a long time, and now I'm trying to get back into it. And the one problem I always have is, the turning off my monkey brain, as you say, when trying to meditate. It just everything from like songs and everything just starts popping into my head, and I find it very hard to clear my mind. So I've also studied some shamanic practices. I spent a year learning to be a shamanic practitioner and for healing. And a lot of that deals with shamanic journeying, which is a lot like meditation, but it's like a combination of meditation, astral traveling, where you're traveling to different worlds and learning. And I was never very good at it. But I did have, some experiences. Lately, I try to meditate, and I just have difficulty. I think it's just the place where I'm at right now, because I'm just coming back from spending a lot of time in the physical world and not really focusing on the spiritual, and I'm trying to get back into it now.
Well, Mark, I want you to try some more, and I'm going to tell you another one of my experiences. Again, part of it is this whole lesson leads you to try to be your best self and not be attached to things. And again, we talked about it when we started meditation, I was really stressed. The first year we meditated, I set a goal to lose 2 pounds a week after we started meditating. And 52 weeks later, I weighed 104 pounds less.
That's incredible.
And if you do research on it, you find that it lowers blood pressure, lowers blood sugar. It actually does lower the cortisol and stress level. And so weight loss was easy for that first year. It just kept falling off. I didn't do anything different. I mean, I was walking for exercise and trying to eat a little better, but I had spent years trying all those same things and didn't lose any weight, and suddenly the weight just fell off. A connection with your spiritual self will make things much easier.
And Mark, it's not easy for me. Dave can just close his eyes and he's connected. I usually have to sit with like spa type music, real relaxing music. And it takes me a good 20 minutes to turn everything off. And it takes practice. It really does. But the benefits outweigh not doing it. That's why we taught it for a while, because especially for, everybody really, but for people that have so much fear, and they're older people that are worried about dying because of what they believe with religion, there's so many reasons to do it. It's just, how often do we sit and do nothing? Therein lies the problem. We need to make the time. To just like we work out or make our bed or take a shower, we need to make the time to have meditation part of our everyday routine.
Well, that's something I struggle with, is making meditation part of my routine. My day job is pretty busy, and then come nighttime, my wife and I, we both work from home, so we're recruiters for our day jobs.
Oh.
And
okay.
so by the time our day ends, it's like, we just want to go sit down, watch TV or relax. So getting that quiet time of sitting for a while, unless she's working late, it gets to be challenging sometimes.
It is.
Just to have that quiet time. I tried doing some today, though, but I fell asleep. I was trying to prepare for this show, but so it's something I'm still working on. But I am very fascinated about the past lives that you were talking about from the 1920s, where you remember being the gangster. And now you shot Dave? Do you remember?
No. I didn't shoot Dave. That story is woven through our first book completely. Dave found out, and as we started to journal everything, that, like we said, my name was Ruby Donaldson. His name was J.J. Wright. He was a junior banker. And I had been sent from Bullock, Georgia, by my parents, who read an article in a newspaper by a woman that we called Aunt May. She actually advertised that if you came to Chicago, you could live in a boarding house, and she would teach young girls skills for life, meaning sewing. And actually, it was a front. What it was a boarding house, all right, but she put us all to work in a sweatshop. And she would take certain ones of us and put us to work in the speakeasy. And, we were there working with the mobsters. We were owned. So basically, Ruby, the person I was then, I was only about 13 years old when I first went to Chicago, and I was put to work immediately. And somewhere shortly thereafter, I could sing. So Aunt May turned me over to Angelo Jenna and put me to work as a singer and dancer in the speakeasy called Dondre's. And I was one of many flapper girls in there. Well, at that wedding, the reason that JJ, Dave, attended that wedding was because he worked for a banker who laundered money for Angelo. So Dave was invited to that wedding. That's how we met. He was not supposed to be around me. But he came and looked me up. That's why it ended in his demise. But there's lots of details in there. It's, we're star-crossed lovers. It's a very sad story. And there's many detailed stories like that in that book. You will laugh, you'll cry, you'll be horrified, some of the lives that we've had. And we've all been saints and sinners. We've all been rich, we've been poor, we've been black, we've been white. Some people have changed sexes. Dave and I have not. He's always been a male, I've always been a woman. And in those lives, I have been Dave's girlfriend, wife, mother, sister, neighbor, schoolmate. We change roles within our family groups. We're not always, in the same role. And it's very addictive, and I understand why people like to go and have past life regression. We don't do it for money. We do it for family and friends to help them. Mm-hmm. It can be very, very healing. If you go to the right person and they're not just doing it to make money, if they really want to help you, because the times that I've regressed people, when we went to the Omega Institute, when we trained with Dr. Weiss and his wife, there were people there from all over the world, and it was really interesting to know that the rest of the world seems to be ahead of the United States in believing in reincarnation. Chile, for instance, they sent their social workers to learn past life regression training to help their end-of-life patients. I don't know why we're not doing that. Japan had a lot of people that were in the health field for that. There were people from all over the world, and it was so nice because we didn't have to change our hat. We could just be who we were, because all of these people also had experiences and they understood it. We didn't have to pretend. You know, it's pretty hard when you live in small town USA. You can't just have a conversation with people. In fact, when the first book came out, The Gift of Past Lives, my whole family has disowned me except for one sister. That's kind of why we wrote the second book, Hell No Reincarnation. It's our reconciliation between, you know, what we learned through our experiences with reincarnation and how we were taught growing up initially. So we were kind of, and I don't like to use this word, debunking what we were taught in Hell No Reincarnation and showing all the proof out there that reincarnation is real. So anyway, that's my take on that. And book 3, the manual that just came out not too long ago, we actually take one of our stories. Hell No Reincarnation has 7 of our past lives with the lessons throughout it. And then the manual has one of our stories woven through that. And the manual, when you think about a manual, let's say you buy a new stove and you open up the manual to assist you, because the manual is meant to help you with your new product. So when we wrote the manual along with Isabella, Mother, and God Elizabeth, it was in a little different order. This is what we wrote in the preface. A manual usually consists of the parts that make up the subject of the said manual. It also includes a section on troubleshooting for when things are not working out as they should, and you must evaluate the situation. Then there is a contact list of those available to assist you with the subject as a whole. And in this case, it's reincarnation. And finally, you'll find the warranty information, and in this case, there is no expiration of the subjects. Hopefully, there is also included a free lifetimes of service adjustments with that warranty, and it also contains a method in which to contact the manufacturer, which we call God or Creator, Source. And our books have been in this order to kind of take you through. First, we shared our experience. Second, we kind of reconciled it with religion as we know it. And then the manual tells us how we're made with each individual life to help you overcome. For instance, we have an angel assigned to us, and the angel is tied to our astrological sign. Dave and I happen to fall under the same angel because, there's 12 astrological signs, there's 12 traits, there's 12 archetypes. They're all included in the manual. Well, we all know what our astrological sign is because it's the month we're born. So I'm born in February. Dave is born in March. And Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries are actually the first part of the astrological sign, which is different than most people think. But they fall under Mariel's Legion, which is the yellow angel of selfishness. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Dave and I are selfish now, but in our past life, we exhibited selfishness. So we're given that angel to help us overcome so that we can move on to the next lesson and not be stuck on selfishness. Now, we talked about Ruby and JJ. Ruby and JJ were very young, but she was involved with the mob, and she didn't think about what was happening around her. She only thought about what she wanted, and her selfishness and JJ's selfishness ended up causing problems for everybody involved and ultimately caused the death of JJ. So in the manual, we explain with a colored chart who your angel is related to your astrological sign, and then your traits. And the traits are related to what we see in nature. And then archetypes, many people have seen those. All of these things are related to your karma to help you overcome.
Well, it's interesting because I'm also Aquarius.
Oh,
but I'm beginning of February though.
Okay.
So, Irene, what's your sign? And don't say stop.
Virgo.
Virgo.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Go. Yeah.
She's a Virgo?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Virgos have the... All right, I'm turning to my chart here. Virgos have
tell me.
No, I want to tell you. I just got to get to my chart.
Can you hear?
It's the green angel of
Right
jealousy.
now? Oh.
Virgos fall with Leos, Virgos, and Libras are lumped together because there's actually 4 groups of 3. And jealousy, that doesn't mean you have jealousy now. That means you had jealousy in your past life. So you were given the green angel from Raphael's Legion to help you overcome that. So, jealousy can be in many forms. Maybe in a past life you felt like somebody had more than you. Maybe you liked, you thought somebody had a better husband, a better life, whatever. Actually, in our first book, because all of these conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness all fall under the 5 simple rules, we actually detail all of those things, because conceit is not just looking in a mirror. You can be selfish with yourself in many ways, conceited in your ways. You can be unforgiving in your ways, and it's not just cut and dry. So that's why our books kind of go in sequence. You can read them separately, but it's nice if you read The Gift of Past Lives first, just because you understand our experience and how this all happened.
I'm not jealous of anyone now. Like you said, it must have been in the past, somewhere in my past. I did actually go to a hypnotist once to stop smoking. Not. And this hypnotist was very interested in me as a person. And he put me under, okay? And all he kept saying was, go back to your previous life, now die. Where are you? He wanted to know what was on the other side. He was so absolutely convinced that I'd be able to tell him what the other was like. And then when I didn't, for some reason I didn't. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't, although I could see it. He would take me into another lifetime. But all the lifetimes he took me into, I was struggling.
But
in one lifetime I was married to a drunk. Another lifetime I was in Egypt. I was a little altar girl or something in a temple. I dealt with, maybe I washed them up, I don't know. And I died on the street in Egypt somewhere. So all my lives were like that, the ones that he took me through. And at the very end, he had 5 minutes of me not smoking.
So basically he was abusing.
It didn't work because yeah, I paid for that. Like I say, it didn't work because obviously when I came outside, before I even got to his garden gate, I lit up a cigarette. But that's all he was interested in, was finding out what after I died in the previous life. He wasn't interested in the previous life. He kept taking me through birth and death and this, that, and the other. And every time he took me through death, what's happening? That's all he kept on about.
Now how did you remember all this?
Yeah, Irene, did he tape it?
Oh, he taped it?
He taped it. And I insisted on having the tape, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Somewhere in this house. So the tape is somewhere in this house, maybe in the attic. I don't know. I haven't seen it for years.
Irene, what's interesting is most people who have past life regression or spontaneous memories do remember traumatic events easier.
Yeah.
So, and that's because those are things that you need to try to avoid. It's interesting because, again, as a physician, I kept doing research on as much real things that could support this. And when you look at some of the theories in conscious and subconscious minds, we find that most of these past life memories are actually in your subconscious, which is how they get accessed when you are hypnotized. And you actually find that the brain changes. You have more alpha waves at the beginning and theta waves back in your brain. Yep. And so those things start to happen when you're hypnotized. They start to happen in the time between wake and sleep when most people remember their dreams. Those are the same wavelengths in the brain that change while you're meditating. And in the subconscious works this way, at least in your current life, we save every memory in our subconscious. From the beginning, when you first touch something that's hot, it burns you. From that moment on, the next time you touch something hot, you pull back faster because all of your positive and negative responses are shared there. And when we do past life regression, meditation, and those things, we actually go back into the subconscious memory of a life before, and you start to remember to start with those things you want to avoid or those things you want to bring closer to you. And that's how we really learn lesson after lesson.
But the funny thing about it, David, was that although it took me past death each time, I just didn't, when you're hypnotized, or when I was hypnotized, if an airplane was to go over, I could still hear. I don't know whether that's the same with you. But every time he took me through the death process, if an airplane passed over top of the house, I'd still hear it. But every time he took me through the death process, I did not want to tell him. I thought it was as if he was being nosy, something he shouldn't know. So I wouldn't tell him.
And I think that's perfect, Irene, because part of the things that a past life regression hypnosis person should do is work with you for what you want to know. And they need to be very good at supporting you when you don't want to go there, because there is no reason to bring up and experience your death. Now, I've experienced my death before while I've been going through these memories, and they're a lot like people who report their near-death experiences. Each time that I die and I have experienced it, I see sort of an experience of tunnels. I see a whirling infinity sign. I travel through time, space, and eternity. There are incredible lights. I feel warm and safe. It would be great if he took you into that kind of experience, because the experience at the moment of death is really, it starts to go dark, and then you start to travel. Probably a little bit like Mark's astral travel experience.
The feeling I had was that he wasn't allowed to know.
And that's fair, because it is your past life. And that's another thing that even Isabella has told us. Even when we find out experiences that other people have, we don't share those, because that's their personal life. We could share our experiences, but we can't share theirs.
Plus, I also think that you were blocking him. Maybe your higher self was blocking him because he was doing it.
Hi, Mark.
Well, he was doing it under false pretenses, too. You went to him to stop smoking, and then he started poking around, doing other things that you did not agree with. You didn't agree for him to do past life readings. So
I never gave him that permission.
Yeah, and you're actually very aware when you're being hypnotized, so you could just not tell him, because you're in control.
Yeah, and you're incorrigible anyway, so, trying to get you to talk about anything is like pulling teeth.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. But I'll tell you another experience, okay?
Sure.
I have two sons. My son, Jamie, when he was 6, was plastic sword in the living room, and he was pretty good with it. I got to admit, he was pretty good. And I said to him, well, he said, I learned it a long time ago. I said, what do you mean? You know how you probe kids for an answer. Eventually we got our child, coming up 6, right? So he hasn't really learned English history or anything at school because he just started school. And eventually we got the answer out of him, and he said that it was with James I. James VI of Scotland and James I of England, which him swordplay. That was his word, swordplay. Taught him
Absolutely.
Swordplay.
Irene, you were breaking up a little, but just for your people that are listening, the experience that your child had where he has a memory they couldn't possibly have is a very normal experience. There's a lot of writing out there on child spontaneous memories.
Yeah, this is
and so they've done a lot of research. And the research
James I.
That's when his life was?
James I of England was also James VI of Scotland, okay?
Yep.
And this was James I ruled between 1566 and 1625. That was his reign. Shorter reign in England than what he had in Scotland, admittedly, but he was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he said. You know, he taught him swordplay. Swordplay. Now, that's a word that a child that age wouldn't know.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have a lot of kids' memories like that recorded. Yeah. My favorite story is a story that happened in India, and there was a kid who was insistent that he lived in a small town next door to his community before, and that he missed his wife, and his family finally took him next door to the next community. And he went up and down the streets till he found his house. And he ran up to the house, knocked on the door, and a lady answered, and he called her by name. And then he ran upstairs in that house and pointed to a floorboard and said, I buried $4,000 under this floorboard. I wondered if you found it. And they dug up the floorboard, and there was $4,000. You can't coach a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old that kind of memory.
No, you can't.
And so those kind of stories.
I'm sorry if my sound quality is still bad.
It cuts in and out, Irene, but we're hearing you.
Irene, every time we do a podcast,
to fix it.
Yeah. Irene, when we do podcasts, many times we find the hosts. We know them already from another life.
Oh.
And when you talk about your son, I'll just say, and Dave and I really don't like telling people when we're related to anybody famous in those lives. We don't like to do that, but I will just say that part of our family group crosses with James V. So like Mark said earlier, synchronicities, we were meant to talk to you. Dave and I have 3 or 4 lives in England. In fact, our very favorite life is in England. His name was Robert. My name was Sarah. And we live in the Cotswold area. And it was a very nice life. But we also have a life where our family members cross with James V. So I'm sure... we'll ask Isabella. Sometimes she'll tell us, and sometimes she'll say it's none of your business. If we cross with you somewhere, she'll tell us.
And of course, I expect you do.
That would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, and of course, Mark, I've already looked at your pictures because I have this thing with eyes. I can always tell. I absolutely know you. I just don't know where yet I wait. I'll get a symbol of some sort, representative of one of my lives, of where you're from. And Irene, your eyes are very knowing too, but interesting that we cross with an English life already.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, it does.
If you wouldn't,
interesting.
If you wouldn't mind, I've got a. What's that, Irene?
Boston.
You're breaking up.
Boston.
Oh yeah, Boston. Well, yeah, that's what I was going to mention. That there was. Well, let me go into. There were a couple of things that I've had happen with me. The first one was actually a dream. And it happened, I think I was in my early to mid 20s. And I just had a dream one morning where I was a American soldier in World War II. And I was in the middle of a battle. It was a running gun battle, running through this field with other soldiers fighting the Germans. And it was a running firefight. Well, Dave, when you talked about feeling the effect of getting shot in that one past life,
yes.
Well, I was shot in the chest, and I collapsed to the ground. Now, I didn't die immediately. I was like a little in shock. And not thinking straight. I kept trying to be a part of the fight and fighting, and I didn't really think. So I had a grenade on my strap to my chest. So I pulled the grenade off, pulled the pin to throw it, and I got shot in the chest again. And I dropped the grenade behind me, and it went off. And there was no pain. It was more like getting hit upside the head with a heavy feather pillow. But then I stopped breathing. Everything went to black. Yep. And then after a moment, I sprung up in bed, gasping for breath, scared crapless, just totally the thought that was an intense dream. And I really at the time didn't know what to think of it. I kind of thought maybe it was a past life memory, but I really didn't know. So I kind of put it out of my mind and I didn't think about it. Well, then about 10 years later, I went to the movies and saw this little film called Saving Private Ryan.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking much about it. I watched the opening, battle. They're storming the beaches of Normandy. Okay, that's fine. It was a great movie. But what hit me was later in the movie when they go off on their quest to find Private Ryan, they're walking through these fields of flowers and grass. And I looked at that and go, that's exactly like what I saw in my dream. And then it kind of came rushing back to me, and I realized I was in Normandy.
There you go.
It may not have been the day,
the same day.
The same day. It might have been, D-Day plus 1 or 2, but I was a part of this battle, and I was shot and killed. But
that sounds 100%. Like the experiences that we've had, Mark. It's you recognize something that's so real that you can't, and then you find it, and you realize that what you found is a memory, even if you've never been there.
And
there's no way you can say no.
Yeah, I had the dream over 20 years ago, and it's still crystal clear in my head. I still remember it. And usually if I remember a dream that vividly for that long, I know it wasn't a dream.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Mark, this is one of those things, and this is one of our experiences early on. We've told you about the Ruby and JJ story, but we actually, I would come in and I would start to tell Carla part of the story. And there was actually a day, because it's just like watching a movie, and I was telling her what I what I had experienced at home and the night before. And I started to tell her the story, and this is what's happening, and this is what's happening. And then I'm telling her the conversation. And Carla started to finish all the sentences and had the same memory. And that's when we were like, oh my God, now what do we do? We're having the same memories at the same time.
Very interesting. Well, here's another one for you. And this one I hope you find very intriguing. And Carla, this is where Irene mentioned Boston earlier. Maybe when you say you know me from somewhere, maybe this has something to do with it. Okay. I'm going to say about 12 years ago, I was contacted because I was a paranormal investigator. I was pretty much out there. A lot of people were contacting me for different things. I was very involved in the paranormal community. And this one woman contacted me, and she was a hypnotherapist, and she was writing a book about past life regressions. And she was contacting people and wanted to know if I wanted to participate. And she sent me a tape, actually just an MP3 file, of her walking you through a regression, just about a 20-minute regression. And so she asked me to try it and see if anything happened. And if it did, I could let her know for her book. So I tried listening to the tape. And every single time I tried listening to it, nothing would happen. Either I'd fall asleep or just nothing would happen. And then I got a little frustrated with it. Finally, about the 6th or 7th time, and again, that's what it all boils down to is practice, practice, practice. Mm-hmm. I was listening to the tape, going through the regression, and all of a sudden I found myself in another place. And I was standing in what I would call like a home library or study or, some kind of a larger room with a lot of wood paneling and an old-time Victorian era furniture. And I looked down at myself, and I was a young woman dressed in this green dress, I would say about the mid-1860s. And I'm sitting there going, okay, this is interesting. And then, so I saw there was a mirror on the wall. So I walk over to the mirror and have a look at myself. And I'm able to see myself in the mirror. And there's this young woman staring back at me with this long, kind of curly red hair, which I have red hair, by the way. It's more auburn now as I'm getting older, but, red hair, and kind of looked like me. A little bit. Kind of looked like me. And then all of a sudden it came to my mind, I was in Boston. I was living in Boston. It was definitely a well-to-do family. It was a nice house. I mean, it was obviously more rich, affluent house. And then a name popped into my head, Marion Howe, Howe. And not Marianne, Marion, with an O-N. Okay. And I just remember the look of the room, and it had this big bay window, and it was a nice room, but that's all I remember. Then I came out of it. So afterwards, I'm thinking about this, and I'm realizing I've got a name, I've got a time period, and I've got a location. So let me do some research. So I, luckily went out there. Thankfully, the internet was around then, and did a lot of internet researching. And it didn't take very long before I found myself. And this is where it gets wild. Okay. I found a woman by the name of Florence Marion Howe. So the Marion was really the middle name. She was born in 1845, She was a daughter of a Dr. Samuel Gridley Howe, and her mother was Julia Ward Howe. Does that name ring a bell?
Well, it doesn't, but I'll tell you where I was in the 1860s. I was an abolitionist living in Boston.
Okay.
My name was Sarah Blake Sturgis Shaw.
Okay.
So we obviously crossed somewhere.
Well, here's the thing. Julia Ward Howe wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And the Howe family were abolitionists.
There you go.
I tell you, there's synchronicity. I could feel my neck the hair starting to stand up.
Yeah, my back's doing the same thing. But as soon as I saw your picture up close, I knew by your eyes that I know you.
Yeah. And, well, that's what's really, really odd. And I was able to find pictures of myself. There's actually a family picture where it has Samuel Gridley Howe along with the other family members. And so I was looking at the photo and I found Florence, and with and you know what, bear with me here. I'm actually going to send you this picture because I want you to take a look at this. This is
and you're saying H-O-W-E, right?
H-O-W-E. Now,
okay.
The reason she was named Florence was the family was good friends and with Florence Nightingale.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And Florence Nightingale was my godmother.
Ah.
Wow. That's incredible. That's a great story, Mark.
That's a great story.
Now, the Marion, here, our listeners can't see this, but, I posted this to you in chat. I just sent you a side-by-side picture of me when I was younger in my 20s and Florence Marion Howe and what she looked like.
I can see it, Mark. Incredibly.
Yeah.
It just popped for 1 minute, but it's perfect.
Yep. The Marion comes from Marion. Oh, good Lord. Bear with me here. Her great granduncle was a general in the Revolutionary War, Francis Marion, who he was one of the inspirations for the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Oh.
Mel Gibson's character was based on him. He was known as the Swamp Fox.
That was a great movie.
Yeah. And he ran guerrilla warfare tactics against the British during the Revolutionary War. So there's some other synchronicities was that eventually Florence Marion Howe married, and she and her husband eventually moved to New Jersey, where I'm currently living. I grew up in California, and I moved out here 20 years ago. So, and now I found where she died. She died when she was 76 years old. I found where she's buried. Ironically, I didn't realize this until today, actually, when I was looking some things up, that where she's buried in what's the name of the town? Highbridge, New Jersey, which is only a couple of miles away from Clinton, New Jersey, where there's an old red mill museum that I've investigated a dozen times with my paranormal group. So I'm buried just a couple of miles away. So I'm jokingly saying that one of these days I'm going to have to go back over there and take a look at it, because I found the headstone too. You can find those online.
Right.
And so I'm joking, saying, I have to go and visit myself, because after all, it's not often you get to walk over your own grave while you're still in it.
Isn't that so cool?
Yeah.
Oh.
Now here's the second part of this, because this is a two-parter. and this is where Irene comes in, and Irene, you're going to have to refresh my memory if you can remember. But when Irene and I was telling Irene about all of this, and as we were going through it, it just came to us that one of my sisters in that lifetime was Irene.
Absolutely. We found that in so many lives where people that we're connected with, we're following through with them again in some way, shape, or form.
Well, the sister's name is Laura Elizabeth Howe. Irene's middle name is Elizabeth.
The names always repeat.
And she was... Irene, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm not talking because I'm breaking out.
Yeah. Well, what was the town you mentioned earlier where you grew up or whatever that was connected with Laura Howe?
Christchurch. I didn't actually grow up in Christchurch. I grew up near Christchurch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a connection.
Laura, because I'm breaking up, Mark, especially to explain who Laura was.
Well, Laura was also an author. Actually, Florence was also an author too. She wrote a few books on etiquette and manners. But Laura wrote a whole bunch of books, including an autobiography of their mother, Julia Ward Howe, which won the Pulitzer.
Oh, wow.
Now, what's again ironic in this lifetime is Irene is an author, and she's written 3 books so far, and the 4th one is on its way.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely. Mark, this is something we didn't know before, but we started doing these past lives, and we were writing down all of our past lives. And as we were finding these memories and doing them, then Carla went back to look. We had a Mayan life, and Carla had been to the Mayan Riviera. We had an English life, and Carla had been to England. We had an Italian life, and Carla had been to Italy. We had a life in North Carolina, and Carla had been to North Carolina. I mean, she had already been there and drawn to all those places. And she had lives in Boston.
Which part of Italy?
Well, we have several. I did the Grand Tour of Italy, and I'm actually, my father was 100% Italian, and his parents actually came from Italy. 3 sisters, arranged marriage, married 3 brothers. They all came over. But our lives there, we had a life in
Rome, Florence, and in northern Italy, too.
Yeah.
Florence, interesting. I had another hypnotist try to do a past life regression on me, and I only got brief images of living in Florence during the Middle Ages. I was like a man pulling a cart trying to sell stuff, but that's and I remember this bridge going over the river, but that's all I remember.
Well,
Laura Howe. She had a trip to Europe, up through Naples to Rome and everything, and she mentions the beauty of Amalfi. You know, Amalfi is my favourite place, and I've got many Italian relatives there.
There you go, Irene. So
we'll find you guys other places, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just also shared a picture of an Irene when she was in her early 20s, with a picture of Laura Elizabeth Howe, and again you could see some of the resemblance in the facial features.
Where are you?
I look more like her now, though, don't I? Now,
yeah,
there we go. I see them.
If you look at me now, with no makeup, like her when she was older. Every time I look at her, I think of my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My grandmother.
So, again, that was just one of the more fascinating things. it took a while for all of it to come together, but once it all did, and we found all the synchronicities, so that we were sisters together back then.
Well, that's really nice.
And you were drawn together again this life, because it works that way, because somehow you guys work well together and you can do something positive with what you know.
Well, there's one other thing I'll tell you, that back, and this was going back about 17, 18 years ago, when I first started trying to do shamanic journeying, and I did again, I've always struggled with meditation or journeying, but I did this one journey, and I wound up in the Akashic Library, the Akashic Records. And I found myself in this huge, gigantic, eternally gigantic library with these big marble columns, and it was all white, and there's rows and rows and rows of books and scrolls and whatever. And I was drawn towards this one section, and there was this one small, tiny section. And in that section were scrolls and books detailing all my past lives. Mm-hmm. And in the vision, I felt compelled to pull two of the scrolls out. The first scroll I pulled out, I didn't read it. I just pulled it out and instantly knew that I was a Roman emperor. Now, I'm not saying it was anybody famous, because there are a lot more Roman emperors than people know, and most of them nobody's ever heard of them. But I was a Roman emperor. Then I pulled another scroll, and I was a lady in waiting during the Renaissance or Middle Ages.
Oh, so, we pass again with you.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, here's what the lesson that I got out of that was balance. And that was, at that point in my life, that was something I really needed to learn about balancing in all different ways, balancing the masculine and the feminine energies, and also showing where in one lifetime I was a man of power, and another lifetime I was a woman of servitude. So...
Oh, Mark, you just hit the head right there.
Yep.
That's the part of all of this, learning compassion and understanding.
You live all sides.
You live all sides. It's not who you are, it's that you learned that lesson. That's incredible. That's very good.
You were sending me some pictures about one of Dave's past lives, and again, this is.
I sent it to you privately because that's one of the lives he doesn't like to announce.
Okay, then I won't mention it. I'll just say that I know this person, and I know of him. Let's put it this way.
Yes,
and
I'm sorry to your listeners, but Isabella really tries to push the point over and over and over again. It doesn't matter who we were before. It's fun. It's interesting. But the idea is, everybody has been somebody famous, and famous people are famous, not for a lot of times, not for the right reasons. So that was
being famous does not make you a good person necessarily.
Well, look at famous people nowadays.
Yes. In the manual, we actually have like 4 famous people from history, and we talk about their 3 consecutive lives. I'll give you one example. Cleopatra. We did her life before she was Cleopatra and her life after, with her astrological sign, her traits, and her archetypes, so that people could see, you're not always a queen, you're not always a king. So we just don't want to focus on the fact that maybe we were somebody rich. Everybody's been kings and queens, we've all been poor, saints, sinners. So yeah, if you would just keep that to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
There's another interesting story that's in the book, because we tried to look at patterns and things that happen, and we actually have a Life as a Viking invading Scotland. Then we have a life as Scottish fighting the English, and then a life as English fighting the Scottish, and find out that we actually fighting yourself. So there's really no winner in any of these wars, because you might be fighting on the opposite side if the war lasts long enough.
You know, it's funny, and again, I'm not going to give anything away, but with that one lifetime that you don't want to talk about, it just hit me that there's another Boston connection there.
Absolutely,
and I'll leave it at that. So
absolutely.
So again, there was a possibility we were all running in the same circles.
We definitely are. I can see it in both of your eyes. Irene, if you can still hear me, I sent you the same pictures of Dave. It might not mean as much to you because, he was in America, but I know by the eyes, because it's the gift I have, at some point you will pop up and I'll see you in certain attire, and that will tell me what life you're in with me. But I do have, I was the daughter of one of the Italian Caesars, and I suspect you could be in there too, Mark. We haven't written about her, and I'll just tell you who she is because she's no big deal. She's Julia the Elder. So, and most people don't know her name, but her father was one of the well-known emperors. But what's funny about that life is that I was married 4 times in that life, and none of it was my choice, because back then women were just pawns and you were arranged in marriage for political reasons or for wealth. But interestingly enough, and I will forward them to your instant message, the people that Julia the Elder was married to then, 3 of them in this lifetime have been boyfriends of mine.
Oh, wow.
I know, and wait till you see the pictures. The pictures are just unbelievable because they look like them still, It's just so, and that was one of the other things that we put in the manual. It's a question we see over and over again on a lot of these reincarnation sites. And people ask, when does the soul enter the fetus? Well, what Isabella has told us is that it depends, if you're cycling back with your soul family, and let's say you died early and you need to cycle back with somebody that lived a nice long life, then you sit and you wait so that you can cycle back at the same time. And then you also have to think about your life review. When you die, you go through your life review, which is, another name for atonement. But that could take a short time, or that could take a long time. As an example, one of my very, very early lives, I poisoned Dave. He was my husband. I poisoned him to death. And
I still like her.
But I sat for 980 years in atonement. Back then, the life reviews were longer because fewer people were on Earth. So they're finding now with the studies that they seem to be coming back shorter. But anyway, in the manual, we talk about the fact that if the soul enters the fetus early on, then you tend to resemble your past lives more than if you enter at the last second. If you enter at the last second, then you tend to look more like your biological parents. But that could be a twofold thing, because often your biological parents have been your relatives. There's a lot of bloodlines that go on and over and over and over again. But that's it. Yeah, we actually have a little part in the beginning of the manual that talks about gene. Help me here, Dave. What's the correct word? Gene.
The correct word is gene expression.
Yeah.
So you can have not only DNA memory, but you could have soul memory that affects your appearance in the next life.
And your scars, birthmarks.
Yes, birthmarks can follow you. Scars, they've done a lot of studies. Kids who have these spontaneous memories will remember where they were stabbed, let's say, to die in their last life. And they look at the wound they've actually matched the autopsy reports with the wound that somebody died in and found a birthmark on the child in the same place.
Yeah. I got a birthmark on my butt.
I now love you more than I even did before.
I mean, this is all so fascinating. And, you know, you're right. The one thing I know, some people want to learn more about their past lives, and then they want to try to like relive it, you know, like they're fascinated with the past. They like a past time period, and they won't let it go. And that's a problem, is that, you know, while I understand that I've lived some of these past lives and I now have some memories of them, or I've had some insight into them, I still don't live back in those times. I mean,
no, it's this time that we have to focus on, because whatever we're here for is to learn what we're here for now.
Right. And I don't remember enough about those times to know of anything other than just either like who I was, or maybe just little piece snippets here and there. And it doesn't really tell me anything. I got more out of that one vision of going to the library to teach me what I need to learn in this lifetime, which was, again, the whole issue of balance, and which really helped me at that point in my life, because there was a lot of balancing out of energies that I had to do within myself. And now I'm kind of on to the next the next chapter.
Yes.
And there's also, I've heard that there have been whole studies done. In fact, I don't know if Brian Weiss was one of them. I mean, I've read a few of his books, along with Dr. Raymond Moody's books, where they did a study of children, and they would ask a lot of them, you know, about past lives, if they remembered who they were before. And again, a lot of the younger children up to like around age 5 could still remember their past life, or they'll remember something, like Irene was mentioning her son did.
Correct.
Yes.
There's been a lot of research done at the University of Virginia, and again, it's Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, who are still doing it, and they find these cases and they get on a plane and they fly to China, or they fly to Canada,
or India.
India. There's a great story in the United States of a young lady who, and I wish I could remember all the details, but she remembered an airplane crash down in Oklahoma and knew details that no 5-year-old could possibly remember.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sure she went down on the plane, and they were able to, you know, find everything, including the house that the plane hit, and the lady who was sitting inside of that house, she could remember and describe. Because it was so slow motion when it all happened. And the lady remembers it, and remembers it knocked off the side of their carports in Oklahoma. And a lot of people died in that, but this young girl had all of these specific memories to hitting that house, and knew which house it was, and they traveled there and they found it. And it, you know, those kind of stories, you can't coach children to do that. Now, I'll be the first one to say past life regression and hypnosis is highly suggestible.
Mm-hmm.
You need an exceptionally good therapist who isn't going to lead you down the story. Because, you know, if you do past life regression for a living, you've heard every historical story over and over again, because you keep taking people back and they tell you stuff. Well, if they say, I look like this, and somebody says, it must be the 1400s, it starts to guide you a little too much. You need to have those experiences on your own.
Right.
And sort of decide where you're at. Because our brain is incredibly powerful. It can create a lot of fantasy at the same time. However, there's enough research and enough experience, and even just the experiences that you and Irene have talked about, to convince me that you understand that we don't just get one chance. There's chance after chance, and that means there is some period of time between lives, and there's a place to go. Whether your theory is that's this level of consciousness that exists outside of this world, whatever that spiritual realm is, we go there and we come back. And that it's not just one life. Our life is eternal. We believe that you can get off of the cycle of reincarnation and return back to God, Tao, Source, Creator. However, either way, people should not fear death because there's no end. And you shouldn't fear hell because
there isn't one.
Because there isn't one.
It reminds me of an old Sam Kinison joke. I remember Sam Kinison, the comedian?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. His old joke was, I'm not afraid of going to hell. I was married for 7 years.
You sounded like him there.
You did.
Yes, that's funny.
So go ahead, Mark.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say, now, just for your listeners, we've had horrible lives. I have the worst past life memory of a Mayan life where I was involved with human sacrifice and bloodletting of innocent children. Okay, now, I'm a really nice guy, I promise all you guys out there. But when I lived through that life, it was a horrible experience to see the things that we did to people. So, much like Carla said earlier, we've been saints and sinners. We haven't always been perfectly great people. We're progressing. We're learning. And we believe that the lesson is we have to start making decisions out of love. You can overcome karma, your past life, by living this life the way you're supposed to.
True. Irene just wanted me to ask you, and I'm not sure I understand that, ask you about the planes.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Carla, go ahead.
That's actually in the manual, that we have a color diagram of the planes as well. The 7 planes of the universe, Earth being number 1. And then there's a veil formed by conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness that keeps us from the other planes. But when you die, when we die, we immediately go to plane 2, where we acclimate for 3 days. And plane 2 is actually where we wait when we are ready to reincarnate. That's where we wait, on plane 2. Plane 3 is actually atonement or a life review. And that's where we meet our council members. Our council members are those people that have, most of them have been like our family mates at some point. They're not coming back anymore, but they're there and they take you through your life review. They're not yelling at us or scolding us or sending us to hell. They're showing us a picture and making us feel what we inflicted onto others, good and bad. That's how we learn. And then plane 4 is where the angels reside, spirit guides, and if you're doing a job for God. And sometimes people make it to this level with the higher vibration and through not having conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness. And they have made it. However, God will say to them, will you go back and help so-and-so? And you agree. So the people that are doing a job for God and they're waiting for whatever reason, or in my sister's case, my sister is the person that passes over all of our family mates now. She died when she was 40. She battled cancer for 4 years. She was the best of all of us 6 girls, I'm telling you. But anyway, she resides on plane 4, unless she's passing us over. Plane 5 is what we like to call the going over the horizon or heaven. Plane 6 is where soulmates reside, and I'm not going to explain it because it's in detail, but actually in the manual we explain what a soulmate actually is, because you hear all kinds of conflicting ideas. People toss that word around a lot. Oh, I think they're my soulmate. Oh, my dog's my soulmate. Well, we explain what a soulmate actually is, and that's, given to us by Isabella. And then plane 7, which is the highest vibration, that belongs to God. And when this world is completely finished, reincarnating all of the souls, then we will all be going to plane 7 with God, Source, Tao, however you want to say it. And then I don't know what happens after that because Isabella won't tell us.
Yeah. I'm going to say something, Mark, because you talked about being a paranormal investigator. I want you to consider that all souls pass over. However, if plane 1 is this earthly plane, and plane 2 is the plane where everybody is waiting to come back, those two planes or levels of energy are incredibly close. And mediums that contact people that have passed over, souls that are trying to reach out to this world because they have memories or things they felt unfulfilled or unfinished, are certainly really on a close plane to those people on plane 1, this earth plane. And I think you paranormal investigators are just spiritual people who reach out and connect to the next level. And there you're experiencing someone's actual spiritual self trying to reach back to earth. So keep up your paranormal investigation some, because those people may be wanting to influence the life they're going to return to.
It's a possibility.
Or they,
Yeah, there's a lot of my research that's taking me in a lot more different directions, not just, the traditional paranormal research anymore. So these types of subjects really fascinate me, these and others as well. So, because I think our reality is a lot stranger and more wondrous than what we realize. We have a very limited view of reality. It's like if you look at the light spectrum, we see a sliver of the visible light spectrum, yet it shoots out on both sides to the infrared and ultraviolet in such a large spectrum, but we can only see this little spot right here in front of us. And that's how I feel our reality is. And even the concept of reincarnation and coming back and living multiple lives, there are other theories out there about us living all of our lives at once, because time is an illusion. All time is happening at once. I don't know if you've ever come across that concept.
Multiple times. If you wanted to have a big conversation with that, we could, Mark, because I understand that, but time is not an illusion in quantum physics. It exists as a vector. Mm-hmm. It is measurable, even in quantum physics, which is where most of those theories come out of. Time is necessary for energy to even exist, because energy is a measure of oscillation over a frequency, which is an amount of time. So all of our physical experiences require time. Because energy, whether it exists the way quantum physics, matter and energy are the same. Matter and energy can't exist without time. So there's some physical things there, because I try to read all this physics stuff too. And there's some physical stuff that we don't understand. And I think the problem for most of us is we're trying to take the physics of the physical world and explain what's happening in the non-physical world. And I'm not sure the two are related, and we are trying to make them so.
Well, that's definitely a much longer conversation for another show because we are running to the end. I will say this, though, to quote the great English writer Douglas Adams, time is an illusion, lunchtime doubly so.
There you go. Yeah, and I usually say if time is an illusion, it's great because it's the same shared illusion that we all have.
Yeah. Well, we actually have come to the end of the program.
Very deep stuff, that, Mark.
Oh, yes.
Mark, that was very deep.
Very deep. Yes, it was. Well, Dave, our guests tonight have been Dave Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd, and we've been discussing reincarnation and one of their books, The Gift of Past Lives, and we've touched on a couple of their other books. Now, David and Carla, where can people find your books, and how can they get in touch with you?
The easiest way would be to go to our website, which is thegiftofpastlives.com. Certainly, there's links to buy our books on Amazon or Amazon UK. It's also available at other UK bookstores, but Barnes & Noble here in the United States and all of the other distributors. You can order it from Walmart and Target if you would like. But Amazon's the easiest way to find us.
Okay, fantastic. Well, again, thank you both for coming on. This has been a wonderful chat and program. I've had a lot of fun, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Mark and Irene, we're going to talk to Isabella and see where we're crossing with you guys. I'm so curious now.
Oh, yes.
We'll let you know.
We're definitely going to keep connected after this.
Yes, there's some definite synchronicities.
And Irene is asking me to let our listeners know we apologize for the sound problems tonight. For whatever reason on Irene's end, there's been some technical difficulties. So we apologize for the poor sound quality. Hopefully we'll have that wrapped up by next week. Speaking of next week, we will be back next week with another brand new edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.